Welcome to Banking to Go by Algebra Labs. Your takeaway insights from the world of financial technology and banking. Served by today's industry leaders. My name is Nizamuddin, your host for today's episode, where we dive into how to build a modern-day digital bank with Mariam Ogunbambi, Chief Client Officer of Engine, Starling Bank's Software as a Service division. A huge welcome to you, Mariam. We have today with us Mariam Ogunbambi, Chief Client Officer of Engine, Starling Bank's Software as a Service arm, which provides financial institutions around the world with access to Starling's cloud-native banking platform. Correct so far?
Correct.
Brilliant. Okay, yes. But you have such a deep history before that title, so I'll quickly go into it and welcome you properly. You lead the ongoing management and support of Engine's existing clients. You previously delivered integrations that made Starling the first in the UK to launch Apple Pay, in-app provisioning, and fully automate the current account switch service. You were also the head of card payments at Starling and delivered integrations between Starling's own systems and the wider banking, payments, and financial landscape. You are the winner of 2 FinTech Awards, Tech Women 50 and Future Stars of Tech FinTech category.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
That was ages ago, though.
Congratulations belatedly, and very welcome to our Banking to Go podcast. We are so thrilled to have you. And I think, I've been wanting to have this conversation for a while with you.
Yes. Thank you
Because
for
I think
having me.
what we have with Engine and what you're building at Engine and what we've been doing at Algebra Labs are 2 entities that are very similar positioned. And I think we were sharing our similar experiences. So it's nice to be able to do this on video, and hopefully a lot of people can take some wisdom and some insight. So you've been at the very forefront of the digital banking revolution in the UK for a while, as we just heard, and you're now increasingly exposed to developments internationally. What have been some of your observations so far? I'd love to hear them.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that over the past 10 years, we've seen the proliferation of digital banking across many markets. The rate of adoption obviously is different depending on the market we're talking about. But what we've really seen is this shift in mindset from just focusing on the bottom line, but really focusing on what the customer demands, what the customer needs are. And we've also seen, actually, to an extent, some flexibility in regulation, right? And when I say that, I'm talking about, banking in the cloud, for example. 10 years ago, who would have thought, right? And look at where we are now. So to an extent, we've definitely seen that. But again, going back to the different markets, I think, we can safely say that the UK, for example, has been quite successful compared to other markets when it comes to fintech and digital banking. And we've seen kind of new entrants come in, and some of them have survived and some haven't survived. And I suppose most people are thinking, well, what sets the survivors apart?
Totally.
And I think for me, I can't claim to know the answer to that, but I can use my experience at Starling Bank to sort of shed some light as to why I think Starling has been able to stay the course and be successful, in the digital banking space. And really it boils down to, I think, going back to our founder, Anne Boden. She had a vision which was to change banking for good. And it wasn't a product vision or a bank-specific vision. This was an industry-wide vision. It was all about changing the industry as a whole. Since inception, Starling Bank, up until this point, we've grown so much. We've been able to amass 4 million SME and retail customers, over 3,000 employees. We're also, I would say, in our third, or have reached our 3rd year of profitability.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Which is actually a great success story, because what we can say from what we've seen, and again, most of these digital banks tend to be private businesses. They have varying reporting cycles. But what we know is that from what we've seen, Starling Bank is the most profitable digital bank, UK or neobank as we call them, in Europe, and the 2nd most profitable in the entire world after Nubank. So I think that speaks volumes. And I think it's really about, going back to that vision and our love for listening to customers. Some of the things that we were able to launch into the market, market-leading products, for example, some of those today are seen as the norm in the digital market banking space.
Yeah, and on that, so the one thing that you think about when you think about consumer behavior and banking generally, and one word comes to mind: trust.
Yes.
And historically, I think what
Starling has been able to do as a first mover is be at the front end of that, building trust with a new form of banking.
Yes.
That I think now many of us who've come through separately in the second and third waves have been able to utilize. And,
yes, exactly.
And do you think that trust is now, do we see that trust now growing around the world, I guess, in terms of
Absolutely.
digital banking?
I mean, like going back to what I was saying about these products, right? So, you know, we were building real products that are helping customers, serving a real purpose. It wasn't just about a business case. And so take, for example, freezing your card. 10 years ago, that wasn't a thing. That is now the basic in any kind of digital banking app. If you don't have that, then, you know, adding your card to your digital wallet, for example, from the app. Yeah. Again, Starling Bank, the first in the UK to launch that. It's now kind of the norm, right? You need to be able to add your card to your digital wallet. You know, we were the first to launch gambling blocks, for example, as well, and other banks followed suit. We had a more recent feature that we launched, which was the high payment reference. Again, most banks have been asked to implement this. So definitely, I would say that we've been able to be market leaders in you know what we've launched and build trust with our customers because we're giving them what they need rather than what the bank wants to make revenue and make money.
I think this is absolutely at the heart of, I think, the digital banking revolution, which is, I think, historically, we've seen big banks do what's right for perhaps the majority in a society. And I think with the advent of technology, the ancillary services, the reduction in costs and the ability to reach people at a cheaper price means you can offer them. And ultimately what digital banking has done and is doing all around the world is being malleable to the needs of a consumer. Now, the wonderful thing with that is it means then consumers' behaviors are changing.
Absolutely.
And because they're changing, it means we've seen a development where you've seen banking as a service, software as a service, fintech as a service, and a new generation of providers that have built their own platforms. Starling, Algebra. There aren't that many else actually. That are now actually building and offering their expertise and their technology elsewhere. And I think that's been really interesting. Why is that development important, I guess?
Yeah. I think before I go into that, one thing I would say is that I came across an on-feeder report that said 80% of customers now look for a fully or prefer a fully digital banking experience.
Amazing.
So
wow.
What that means is that, you know, digital banking first and foremost is the future, right? And traditional banks can't run away from
almost
that.
Arguably,
It's where we need to go, full stop. And so I think when we were starting out at Starling building the platform, I think we were genuinely frustrated at the options on the market for core banking technology. We couldn't really find the capabilities and the services that we needed to be able to deliver on the vision that I spoke about, you know, that Anne and the team wanted to create for customers. There was no option out there that we could find. And so the answer for us was build it ourselves. Build your own. And I think that when we were, you know, looking at that, we knew that we wanted it to be cloud native because there's the agility, there's the ability to respond to customer needs, changing customer demands, as we've spoken about, the scalability and the resilience that comes with that. So all of those things were really key for us. Now, there were elements of the platform that we had to outsource at the start. So, you know, contact center, for example, card processing capabilities. But over time, we then ended up building that ourselves. And I think that genuinely for these new next generation BaaS and SaaS providers, it does come from a place of frustration in the first instance. And you know what they say, if you want it done right, do it yourself. And so I think that's kind of where it's kind of born out from. It's either they've experienced the frustration themselves or they've seen the frustration that others are experiencing and have decided to come out with these. And I think that is really, really important in terms of pushing the dial when it comes to innovation, in terms of, you know, Engine effectively is helping, you know, our clients. And Engine, I don't think we've talked about Engine actually yet, but so Engine is effectively the technology arm of Starling. It's where we've, you know, this core banking platform that we've built from scratch. We are now able to take that technology stack and sell that and license that to other banks around the world. So that's effectively what Engine does. But so going back to Engine, so what we're doing is we are allowing our clients to better improve, the customer experience. But we're also allowing new entrants actually into the market. And I think, again, with these next-gen SaaS providers, that's what it's all about, creating healthy competition. We can't have a monopoly of the tech, I think.
And look, and like you say, we're going through a massive period of disruption.
Yes.
And as you say, necessity is the mother of all inventions. And I think Starling, similar to even our own experience, there are some things you're like, why is this so hard? Why is it so difficult? You build it yourselves.
Yeah.
Now, for me, a really interesting phenomenon that emerges. So when you now go and have conversations with future clients, potential clients, how much of the credibility of having your own entity in the UK that's regulated, how much does that matter?
I mean, I think that's really, for us, one of our unique selling points, I would say, because we are uniquely positioned to, one, understand the technological challenges that these banks are facing.
You're doing it every day?
Because we're on this journey.
Yeah.
We also have the experience of building and running a bank from scratch. So there is a lot of our learnings, our experience, our expertise that we're able to share. So it's not just about buying the technology, but you're also getting all these things from Engine that we've experienced through our journey, because we've been there, we've done that, we know, and we're not a consultancy. So I want to make that very clear. We are a SaaS company, but I think the benefit of being able to learn from our mistakes and our experiences is something that you can't put money on, to be honest, in my opinion anyway.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think attached to that, of course, the pace of adoption around the world is we're seeing regulatory environments evolve very quickly in different parts of the world, with EMIs, digital asset regimes coming into play.
Yeah.
How does that affect the pace of adoption? So in terms of, like you say, on one level, you may go to a bank that's just like, oh, we're falling behind and we need to work with a tech company, a SaaS provider to digitize. But then because of these new regulatory regimes, you now have entirely new entrants coming in.
I mean, I think that we're always going to see disparity in the rate of adoption across all the different markets. And I think that when it comes to the regulators, I don't know, I almost see it as a double-edged sword in a weird way. It's kind of in some way they encourage the competition, and in others they sort of inhibit it in a way.
Yeah, it's that very fine balance.
Exactly. And I think for us, for Starling, when Starling first started, this was we had to get to a point where we could get the regulators comfortable with a fully digital cloud native bank. I mean, they come from understanding legacy infrastructure and how the traditional banks do it. And now we're having to take the regulators on this whole new journey of, we can do banking differently and we can do it better. And that journey does take time. And I think that we have to be cognizant of that, because it's that time that then means that the rate of adoption across multiple different markets are different, right? So 10 years ago to date now, we've been able to progress so much in the UK, and the regulators have come a long way. But if we talk about somewhere like maybe the Middle East, for example, they're still on that journey of really understanding what it means to be a cloud native digital bank, right? So I think on that, I would just say, yes, it is always going to be different. But what I will say is that proliferation is just, it's increasing more and more.
It's so interesting to hear your experience and insights into the UK and this push-pull between disruptor and regulator.
Yeah.
And who's actually educating who, in a sense, right?
Yeah.
And that's interesting. And I say this because I think I wonder some insights perhaps into what some of the potential clients, how are they prioritizing their digital strategy? What are they thinking about? Are they, thinking about viewers and observers who are from the big banks, and they're thinking about, this is great. And I assume they'll be thinking about, I should prioritize my core banking engine immediately. That's the one thing I should be thinking about. But then often what isn't happening is actually there are multiple vendors that you have to do multiple RFPs with, etc.
You see, so I'm going to answer that in a very interesting way. So bear with me.
Please.
But I think that from my view, there's sort of two schools of thought when it comes to digital transformation. There's the one school of thought that sees digital transformation as a project. So it has a start and a definitive end, right? And then you have the other school of thought that looks at it as a journey, right? So it's ongoing. And And I think that that's the first hurdle, right? Is getting over that mindset shift of looking at it as a journey versus a project. Don't get me wrong, the technical term project, I think we all use that in our day-to-day dealings. But it is really important to remember that when you are thinking about digital transformation, it isn't just about, looking at the next 3 to 5 years, your strategic plan, the business case, etc. But I think, in my opinion, it transcends time. So it's looking at what does the next 30, the next 40 and beyond looks like. And I think for me, the broader sense is that most of these execs are sort of focused on the strategic element of planning. That takes too long. And like you said, they're sort of doing the digital transformation in the same way with the same processes that inhibit real change.
Spot on.
So lengthy procurement processes, RFIs and RFPs, and lots of planning meetings and, ongoing, that you spend so much time in the planning phase that you actually don't get anything done and you don't see any real value or real change happening. So I think for me, the real focus, when they're thinking about digital strategy or digital transformation really is about just getting something done.
Yeah.
Exactly. Let's not focus too much on the planning or at least find the right level of balance between the two and get something done. And particularly the focus on, I hope this is going to be a running thread in this podcast, but on the customer experience. What do the customers want, but also the employees as well, right? Because if you're focusing on both of those things, then you're more likely to increase your revenue, because what you're doing is you're being able to attract and retain customers, but at the same time, you're also equipping your employees with the right tools to be able to then better serve your customers. And ultimately, it's kind of be
happier in the process.
Exactly.
Because you want your job to be easy, right?
Absolutely. But not even just easy, because you can have a hard job, but if it's rewarding and you can see the real change that you're making, I think that's what makes the difference, because then you get that satisfaction from seeing what the outcome of the hard work that you've put in. Do you know what I mean?
I want to give you a really random, this weekend gone.
Yes.
I went away. I'm not going to name the airline. Yeah. I'm very loyal to them and I'm very upset at the moment.
Okay.
So this is a prime example of what happens when you combine legacy and digital. I went through the app to acquire something. Then I had to change my flight time. I called them and said, hey, I did it digitally. Can you change it back? Sorry, we can't. It's going to take us 24 to 48 hours because we have to do it manually. We'll come back to you.
Oh, no.
And the person on the phone, I can tell, is like absolutely sad because this is embarrassing.
Yeah.
Because the thing that you try to make easy digitally on the app, you've just
back end,
right?
Yeah.
And I was like, I actually immediately understand what's going on here, because actually on one end, you're trying to do what's right for the customer.
Yes.
But your foundations are wrong.
Exactly. And I think that's why the core banking is important, because what is underneath the top part, and that's effectively the technology that your employees or the people that work for the company have access to. And so as part of that, these execs really do need to look at their IT functions. They need to take a deep dive into that and look at where they can make efficiencies, where they can automate, where they can innovate. That's really, really important. But also, I think another thing is to remember, and we've talked about this as well, you can't do it on your own, right?
Exactly right.
You're going to need to have partners, and you need to find the right partner with the shared vision, which I think is really, really important, that alignment of goals and objectives. Because ultimately, if you're choosing the right partner, you're in it for the long haul. For me, that is getting that shared understanding is more important than completing a bunch of questions.
And on that, right, on the shared understanding, I think this is so, if we're going into the nitty gritty of our approach to doing this, you've highlighted it perfectly. You have a cultural problem ultimately, as in you have large banks, and they work through process and bureaucracy because that's what you do, right? Whereas when you built something from scratch, you understand sometimes you've got to break a few eggs to make an omelette, and you've got to be a bit quicker.
Yeah.
Now, the challenge then for me, and this is a question that we ask ourselves, and I know you do too, which is how do you build the trust of, let's say, the CTO and that engineering and tech team who perhaps have, through no fault of their own, been told, do it in this paradigm, right? And
Yeah.
go do it. And then inevitably, it's more expensive. It takes more time. We know this for a fact.
Yeah.
So many examples.
Yes.
And then eventually they'll be like, actually, who else is there? So is any insights into how we can exploit that for them?
I think firstly, a lot of organizations have built a culture, looks at change as a risk.
Yeah.
And actually, the real risk is not changing, right? If we go back to digital transformation as a journey, it's an ongoing thing. There's never really an end. You're constantly improving, constantly iterating. And I think for us, the first and foremost thing in terms of building trust, because obviously these are huge decisions, I get it, right? You're making a big decision for the organization right now, and you have to have the balls, to do that. And so I think first and foremost for us is really being able to understand the challenges they're facing and where they are as a bank. And again, we are uniquely positioned to be able to do that because we've been on this journey, because we've gone through that, and so we can empathize, we can relate. And then going back to that shared vision, especially at the leadership level, right? Because we have to say this, it has to come top down. It effectively could probably come both ways and meet in the middle, but ultimately in terms of direction, it has to come top down. And so, when we're meeting with the top execs, for a client or for a potential client or a bank, they're meeting with our execs, there is that there has to be that really shared understanding, shared vision of what it is that we are trying to.
Now, you're in that meeting, you're facing that exec face to face. How do you respond to that bewildered look that I know you get when you say, we'll do it cheaper and quicker and get it to market? Because I think culturally that is not something that's in their repertoire, right? It's not in the vocabulary.
Yeah.
How do you respond to that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think, we always start the conversations with telling them what anything can do. But I think the conversations then start to turn a bit or change when we demo the platform itself, specifically Management Portal. So we didn't really understand the true value of Management Portal until we started showing it to other banks. And this is the operational portal that is basically what we call a single pane of glass. It's a 360-degree view of the customer. So employees don't have to go to multiple systems to understand about their customer, know what they need to know about their customer, right? Again, going back to operational efficiencies, which is really key to your cost base. So showing them that, I think they're just immediately blown away because that's unheard of for them. In their world and in their minds, there are multiple systems that their employees are having to deal with just to understand who their customer is and what their customer wants. So that's kind of the first tick in the box for us. The second thing, when we talk about time to market, there are a couple of things here. One is that we understand that the app is seen as really the long pole in the tent, if you'd like, or the most challenging part when it comes to build. And so we have SDKs, mobile SDKs, that we make available to our clients that they can pick and choose, or have everything if they want to. So they're in different modules. And again, that accelerates, if you'd like, the time to market, or reduces the time to market, if you'd like. And then going back to our experience and our learnings and our expertise, those are all sort of things that just by way of conversation, we're helping them learn from our mistakes. And that automatically helps to reduce time to market, right? Because they don't have to go through what we went through. We went through the hard way, the long route, so that they don't have to. And again, that makes it a lot more real. But I think the key, I suppose, drive or the key proof in the pudding, as they say, is the fact that we're able to demonstrate it. And so recently we launched with Salt Bank in Romania, just under 12 months from writing the first line of code to completion. Now, that is unheard of. It's a new benchmark that we set in the market. Is not the norm, as you have said.
Absolutely, yeah.
But the fact that we are able to evidence that with a client, and they have been really successful to date. They've had over 200,000 customers. Actually, they had that in sort of 8 weeks, if you like, of launch in April of this year. And they continue to grow. And that, again, just demonstrates, how our platform can help our clients scale very rapidly. So I think putting all of these things together, it's a no-brainer.
And it's interesting. You said something earlier about so exactly the same. Your single pane of glass.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, it's amazing to hear because it's the first time we're having a conversation.
Yes.
We have our own version called Mission Control, MISCO.
Ooh, Mission Control.
Yeah.
I like the name.
Cool name.
What do you think about Management Portal?
Yeah, we can talk about it. Yeah.
Okay, fine.
So MISCO for sure. Single port, but actually, when you go to the back end of a bank and you say, hey,
Yeah.
you have 15 different agents right now dealing with the different life cycle of a customer. It's all here, and you can limit a person's authorization, right?
Yeah,
so you can't have everyone see everything.
So access controls.
I say that because one of the potential challenges of that, of course, is, and we've heard this from, Klarna say this recently about staffing, right? Because it might mean less staff, which efficiency-wise is great. And I say that in a wider context of what are some of the challenges that you're faced with when we promote a broader SaaS approach? Are there any challenges that people come up with?
I think for us, it's different for us. I think banks have tried it, or these clients are coming to us because they've tried it one way or their way, and it hasn't worked. They've not been able to see the real value or the real change that they've wanted from going on this journey. And so for them, they're ready for something different that's going to give them results. And so I think for us, we haven't really seen much of a challenge in terms of looking at it from a workforce perspective, because we're offering a SaaS product to them. If anything, they're sort of more open to it because as part of that, we're offering a 24/7 managed service. And so again, going back to the fact that this is a really huge decision, there are a whole bunch of things that execs have to think about, obviously, when we look at this digital transformation journey. And we're taking a bit of that pressure off of them. I mean, for us, and I think for them, they see that as a benefit rather than a challenge. I think what's also interesting on the workforce thing is when we look at Starling, although, yes, we have all of these operational efficiencies through the platform, we still maintain a 24/7 human contact center. And I think that is really important because there is no automation behind in the discussions. I know there's a whole bunch of discussion around AI. Won't go down that route, but and I think the same with Salt Bank as well. They've done a similar thing. So yes, they've got a great SaaS platform, but they are still maintaining a human contact center. And again, going back to that shared vision, right? Because, they saw what Starling had done and how successful we've been able to make it. And, in some cases, they've been able to replicate that in their own jurisdictions. So, yeah, I don't think we've been met yet with any challenge.
I think it's a great thing. And I think when we go to market and we have conversations, it's often off the back of problems that existing banks have had, and you're trying to solve for it. And I think the really interesting thing that you said, which is so applicable, is I think people are so used to protracted timelines of building something that the idea of actually we can build this from scratch within a 12-month window is. And I think it's going to become the norm, which is going to be really. So we should do this in 5 years' time when it becomes the norm.
Oh my God! Imagine if it's 6 months. Oh God!
Yeah, even better.
Yeah.
Now, you're in Romania now. Congratulations.
Thank you.
There's an Australia element as well.
Yes, we are working with.
So, where are you most excited about the world?
Well, to be honest, as our ambition is global, SaaS company take over the world. So we're excited about many markets. As you mentioned, the APAC region. Again, we're working with AMP Bank in Australia and hoping to launch with them soon. Southeast Asia is also an interesting market that we're really interested in because we're starting to see an increase in digital innovation out there, and especially for the SME space. And also there's this new issuance of, in Thailand, for example, issuing of banking licenses. So we want to be able to be a part of that. Europe, of course, we've seen the success of Salt Bank. We would love to replicate that with other clients in different markets out in Europe. The Middle East is also an interesting one. Again, similar to Southeast Asia, we are starting to see that there is that increased focus and increased interest in digital innovation, digital banking, especially again in the SME space, because that tends to be an underserved market, and also more government funding, and so that's another area that we'd obviously love to explore as well. But ultimately,
the whole world,
is our oyster. I mean, it's a $91 billion addressable market for Engine. The world is our oyster.
And I think we feel exactly the same. I think the world is huge, and I think the world is changing, and the timing is now. And I think everyone is realizing how quickly this needs to happen. And the great thing is, because of first movers like Starling, you said Nubank, you have N26, you have Revolut. There's now a real sense of it's doable.
Yes, absolutely.
And it lasts.
Yes.
And it's trusted. It doesn't go away.
Exactly.
And everyone also thinks like, we've got to do something about this.
Exactly. Yeah. That's it. We've got to get on this bandwagon. And
so that leads me to the question, what's next for Engine?
I mean, there's a lot going on. As you can imagine, we only launched Engine in 2022. So we're still building out, the proposition. We're still growing our teams. We obviously want to make sure that we launch successfully with AMP. That's kind of priority at the moment. Continuing to better service our clients as well. I think that's important. Obviously, we're live now with Salt Bank. We want to make sure that we continue with that level of service that is, seen as really high and on par with what Starling Bank is offering to customers. And I think just capitalizing on all of the markets that I've just talked about, really. So lots going on at Engine, and I'm sure if people want to know more, they can head to our website.
How very exciting, Mariam. I think this is when we first met many months ago now at that dinner, and we talked about even from there to today. Actually, it's amazing how quickly the industry has moved, and I'm very excited to come back in a year's time.
And discuss what's happened,
where things are, because I actually think the phrase we like to use now is where we've gone from a world where banks perhaps saw fintechs as their enemy, and now actually they're seeing them as best friends.
Yes, as a partner, not just a vendor, but a partner, which I think is really important.
So Mariam, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Very grateful.
Thank you for having me.
Look forward to seeing you soon.
Absolutely, I loved being a part of this. So thank you for having me.
Pleasure.